The mysterious arrival. The night sky over Earth was unusually quiet. The stars shone brightly, and the usual hum of the city streets could be heard from the windows of buildings. It was a peaceful night, a night like any other. But no one could have predicted that this night would be the beginning of something that would change the world forever. It was around midnight when the first signs appeared. At first, it was a bright flash, a streak of light cutting across the sky, bright enough to wake people from their sleep. Most thought it was just another meteorite falling from space. But then it slowed, almost as if it was moving deliberately, and crashed into the forest just outside a small town in North America. The impact was enormous. Trees splintered, and the ground shook violently, sending tremors through the surrounding areas. People in nearby towns rushed outside, curious and frightened. What was it? A meteor? A plane? Or something else entirely? The military was the first to respond. Helicopters circled the crash site, and soldiers were soon on the ground, ready to secure the area. But when they reached the crash site, they found something they could never have imagined. A massive alien ship lay in the clearing, its twisted and blackened hull surrounded by a strange glowing light. The craft was unlike anything they had ever seen. It was made of metal that shimmered with an unnatural glow, its surface covered in alien symbols and designs. The craft seemed to pulse with an energy that hummed in the air, sending a chill down the spines of those who stood too close. The soldiers kept their distance, unsure of what to do. No one had ever encountered something like this before. Was it a weapon, a trap, or something else? The only thing they knew for sure was that the craft wasn't from Earth. Minutes turned into hours, and still no one approached the ship. The authorities set up a perimeter around the site, keeping the public away. But inside the military command tent, a different kind of plan was being set in motion. Dr. Marcus Hale, a leading scientist in the field of alien technology, was called to the site. He had worked on similar projects before, analyzing mysterious objects that fell from the sky. But this was something entirely different. This wasn't just a rock or a piece of debris. This was a ship from another world. When Dr. Hale arrived, he stood still for a moment, taking in the sight of the wreckage. The ship's design was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. It was sleek, angular, and covered with strange symbols that seemed to move when he stared at them. The ship was damaged, but there was no sign of fire or explosions. It was as if it had simply fallen from the sky, like a leaf drifting down to the ground. "Can you tell what it is?" one of the soldiers asked as Dr. Hale walked closer. "I don't know," he replied, his voice filled with awe. "But I intend to find out." Carefully, he approached the ship, his eyes scanning every inch of its surface. There were no obvious markings or logos that would indicate its origin, but the technology was undeniably advanced. His mind raced with questions. How long had this ship been traveling? What kind of civilization had built it? And most importantly, why had it crashed here? As he stepped closer to the wreckage, he noticed something odd. The craft's hull was cracked in several places, but inside there was a soft, pulsing light. It wasn't just the light from the ship itself. It seemed to be coming from something inside, something alive. Dr. Hale knelt down, pulling out his tools and scanning the area. As he worked, the soldiers and military officials waited anxiously nearby, unsure whether they should intervene. But Dr. Hale didn't seem worried. His curiosity was far greater than his fear. Then something unexpected happened. With a low hum, the ship began to shake. The ground beneath them trembled as if the ship itself was coming to life. Dr. Hale quickly stepped back, raising his hands to signal for the others to stay back. The soldiers immediately went on high alert, their weapons drawn. But the ship's movement didn't seem threatening. In fact, it seemed almost curious. The glowing light inside the ship grew brighter, and then, with a loud click, a hatch opened, revealing a dark interior. Inside the ship, something shifted. A figure, tall and humanoid, stepped out of the shadows. It was covered in dark, metallic armor, with glowing symbols etched into the surface. Its face was hidden behind a helmet, but there was no mistaking the alien nature of the figure before them. The soldiers raised their weapons, but Dr. Hale held up his hand, signaling them to stop. He had no idea what this creature was, but it was clear that it wasn't hostile. At least, not yet. The figure stepped forward, its movements fluid and graceful. As it reached the edge of the ship, it paused and turned to face Dr. Hale. Its helmet glowed faintly, and for a brief moment, Dr. Hale thought he saw something, perhaps a hint of recognition, or even curiosity, in its eyes. The alien raised a hand, and suddenly, a low hum filled the air. It wasn't a sound from the ship, but something coming from the alien itself. The air around them seemed to shift, and the ground beneath their feet rumbled again. "What is it doing?" a soldier whispered. "I don't know," Dr. Hale answered, "but I have a feeling it's trying to communicate." And then, as if on cue, the alien spoke. Its voice was deep and resonant, yet there was something strangely calming about it. "We come in peace." The words echoed through the silent forest, sending a wave of shock and disbelief through everyone standing there. The ship, the alien, and the words. Everything about this moment was something they had never expected. It wasn't a military invasion. It wasn't a war. It was something entirely different, and no one knew what the future would hold. But one thing was certain. The world would never be the same again. The alien guardian awakens. As the alien stepped out of its craft, the soldiers held their breath, unsure of what would happen next. Dr. Hale's mind raced. "We come in peace." The words from the alien echoed in his mind. But how could they be sure? How could they trust a being from another world, standing before them in armor, looking so unfamiliar and otherworldly? The alien's voice was deep, but it had a calming resonance. The way it spoke seemed almost deliberate, as if it were choosing each word carefully. Dr. Hale knew this was no ordinary encounter. There was something incredibly important happening, something beyond anything humanity had experienced. But it wasn't just the alien's words that had captured his attention. It was the way the ship seemed to hum and pulse with energy, as if it was reacting to the presence of this being. The soldiers didn't move, their hands still gripping their weapons, but no one fired. It was almost as if they were frozen in place, staring at this mysterious visitor from the stars. For a long moment, the alien simply stood there, its glowing eyes scanning the group before it. Then, without warning, it moved. With fluid grace, it took a step forward. The air around it seemed to shift, like the very atmosphere was adjusting to its presence. The ground beneath their feet felt different, almost as if it were vibrating with energy. The alien was far taller than any human, its towering figure almost intimidating. But despite its imposing appearance, there was an undeniable calmness in its movements. Dr. Hale stepped forward, his curiosity outweighing his fear. He couldn't help but feel that this moment, this first contact, was a turning point for humanity. His voice was steady as he addressed the alien. "Who are you?" he asked, trying to keep his tone calm, his mind racing with the thousands of questions he had. The alien's helmet tilted slightly, and for a brief moment, Dr. Hale thought it might be studying him, evaluating his worth. The response came slowly, as if the alien was carefully translating its thoughts into words. "I am a guardian," it said, the deep voice vibrating in the air. "I was sent to protect what remains. You must understand, the galaxy is not as you think." The words sent a shiver down Dr. Hale's spine. "Protect what remains," he repeated, trying to understand the alien's cryptic message. The alien's armored form moved again, and it reached out with one hand, placing it gently on the ground, as if seeking something from the earth itself. The earth beneath its hand seemed to respond, a strange energy rippling through the air. For a moment, Dr. Hale thought he saw a flicker of light running along the alien's armor, as though it was charging or activating some hidden mechanism. "This world is special," the alien continued, its voice growing softer. I have repaired what was broken, but the time for peace has passed. You must prepare." The soldiers, still wary, exchanged confused glances. What was the alien talking about? What had it repaired? And what did it mean by the time for peace being over? Dr. Hale stepped forward cautiously. "What do you mean? What do you need from us?" His voice was steady, but a deep feeling of unease began to settle in his chest. It wasn't just the alien's mysterious words, but the sudden change in the air, the way the energy around them seemed to grow more intense. The alien didn't answer immediately. Instead, it looked toward the wreckage of its ship. The broken parts of its craft seemed to glow with an eerie light, and for a moment, Dr. Hale wondered if the ship itself was alive, reacting to its occupant. The creature's hand moved again, and the ground beneath them rumbled. This time, it wasn't just the earth. It felt as if the very air itself had thickened. Then the alien spoke again, its voice almost a whisper. "It has begun." The words were chilling, and the silence that followed felt deafening. The soldiers, still standing in awe, exchanged nervous glances. What had begun? And what did the alien mean by "protect what remains"? Before anyone could respond, the alien turned away from them and began to walk toward the ship. With each step, it seemed to grow more powerful, more confident. The ground trembled beneath its feet, and the pulsing energy from the ship seemed to intensify. Dr. Hale couldn't help but feel that this encounter was far from over, and that it was only the beginning of something much bigger than they could comprehend. As the alien reached the wreckage of its ship, it turned its head slightly, its glowing eyes locking onto Dr. Hale's. The brief glance held an unspoken message, one that sent a chill down his spine. "Prepare," the alien said, the word carrying a weight that seemed to echo through the still night air. "The galaxy is changing. You will have no choice but to choose a side." The word hung in the air like a warning. Dr. Hale's heart raced. What did the alien mean? What side? And what was coming that could change the course of history? The world around him seemed to shift, and he knew, deep in his bones, that humanity was no longer just a bystander in the universe. They were about to be caught in something far larger, something far more dangerous, and nothing would ever be the same again. The hidden threat unveiled. Dr. Hale stood frozen as the alien guardian continued its strange ritual near the wreckage of its ship. Every moment felt like it was charged with an unseen energy. The soldiers, still standing in stunned silence, exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what was happening or what to do next. The air seemed to grow colder, and the ground beneath their feet continued to vibrate, as if something was waking, something ancient and very powerful. Dr. Hale's eyes were fixed on the alien's movements. The Guardian's every motion was deliberate, as if it was piecing together a puzzle that only it understood. The soldiers tightened their grips on their weapons, ready for anything, yet they couldn't help but feel that no amount of firepower would ever be enough to stand against this being. Then, without warning, the Guardian spoke again, its deep voice cutting through the thick silence. "You do not yet understand," it said, its voice low but carrying the weight of finality. "This world, this galaxy, it is dying. It is already too late for peace." Dr. Hale took a step forward, his mind racing with questions. "What do you mean? What's happening to the galaxy?" His voice cracked slightly, betraying the fear that had been slowly building inside him. The Guardian's glowing eyes seemed to focus on him for a long moment. The temperature dropped even further, and the hum of energy around them intensified. "The galaxy is dying," the Guardian repeated, its voice growing colder with each word. "The balance has been broken. The forces that rule here, the Galactic Empire, will not save you. They are part of the problem." Dr. Hale's heart pounded. The Galactic Empire. The name alone carried so much weight, so much power. He had heard stories of its vast reach, its ability to conquer and control entire worlds. Could it really be that the Empire was not just a threat to humanity, but a force destroying everything in its path? But the Guardian's words made no sense. If the Empire was a part of the problem, then why was it here, standing on Earth with humanity, offering no answers? As if sensing Dr. Hale's confusion, the Guardian continued. The Empire's greed is eating away at the universe, consuming everything it touches. Its hunger for power is infinite, and it does not care who or what it destroys. Dr. Hale's mind was spinning. This was beyond anything he could have imagined. The Guardian wasn't just a lone traveler, a protector of its own kind. It was a witness, a warning, to something far more dangerous. "What can we do?" Dr. Hale asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The weight of his words hung in the air, as if acknowledging that they had passed some invisible threshold from the unknown to the inevitable. The Guardian's posture shifted. It stood tall, even more imposing than before. "There is little time," it said. "Your people must be prepared. The Empire has already begun its move." Dr. Hale's mind raced. He thought of the reports that had come in from military satellites, of strange readings that couldn't be explained, massive energy signatures from deep space, as if something powerful and dangerous was making its way toward Earth. Was it the Empire? Had they come to Earth not just to conquer, but to wipe it out? And now this Guardian was here, warning them. But was it too late? "Tell me what we must do," Dr. Hale demanded, taking another step forward. "What are you offering us?" The Guardian remained silent for a moment, its gaze fixed on the horizon. The energy around them seemed to pulse in time with its words. "What you will receive is not a gift," the Guardian said finally. "You must fight for survival. There is no other choice." Dr. Hale's heart sank. He had hoped for a peaceful resolution, for some kind of understanding that could keep humanity safe without conflict. But the Guardian's words were unmistakable. The galaxy was dying, and the Empire had caused it. And now Earth, humanity, was caught in the middle of a war that would determine the fate of everything. The Guardian turned its back on them, its massive form seeming to glow brighter with each passing moment. "You will need allies," it said, its voice echoing in Dr. Hale's mind. "There is no survival without unity, no survival without action." Dr. Hale watched as the alien moved toward the wreckage once more. A strange hum filled the air, and the ground beneath them trembled once again. The soldiers tightened their grips on their weapons, their unease growing with each passing second. What had they just heard? What was the Guardian truly capable of? In the distance, the sky darkened, and a low rumble of thunder seemed to echo across the landscape. Dr. Hale knew the Earth was changing, but he couldn't understand how far-reaching this change was. The Empire was coming, and humanity was ill-prepared. And now, with the alien Guardian's ominous warning still echoing in his mind, he understood one thing. Earth was not just another world. It was a battleground. The fate of the galaxy, of everything, rested on humanity's next move. A deadly choice. Dr. Hale's mind raced as the words of the alien Guardian echoed in his ears. The idea of the Empire being the true enemy, of Earth being caught in the middle of a war far bigger than any human could comprehend, was too much to process. It felt as if the weight of the entire galaxy was resting on his shoulders. But what could they do? Humanity wasn't prepared for a war of this scale, let alone to face an enemy like the Galactic Empire. The soldiers around him remained silent, their faces grim. No one spoke, as if the magnitude of the situation had numbed them all. Their once confident stance was now replaced with fear. But Dr. Hale could see something else, an unspoken determination. Humanity had always faced its greatest challenges head-on. They had survived against impossible odds before. Why should this be any different? "What do we do now?" a soldier muttered, breaking the silence. His voice was thick with uncertainty, but there was also a trace of resolve. "How do we stop an empire like that?" Dr. Hale didn't have an answer. The stakes were too high, and the danger too real. They had to act, but the cost of failure was unimaginable. Earth, humanity's home, could be wiped off the map if they didn't find a way to prepare. But how? Who could they turn to for help? The Guardian said, "We need allies." Hale replied slowly, thinking aloud. "But who can we trust? How do we know who's on our side?" The soldiers exchanged uncertain glances. The idea of uniting with unknown forces was unsettling, but the alternative was even worse. Isolation, vulnerability, and death. "Maybe we don't have a choice," one soldier said quietly. "Maybe we have to take that risk." Dr. Hale nodded grimly. "You're right," he said. "We have no choice. The Guardian said the galaxy is dying, and we're in the middle of it. If we don't act now, it's over." The tension in the air thickened as Hale's mind struggled to piece together a plan. Earth had no real allies, no space fleet to speak of, no technologies capable of fending off the Empire. But they had something else, something that no one else could replicate: the human spirit. He thought about the wars humanity had fought, the sacrifices, the resilience. Earth had overcome impossible odds before. This would be no different. But they needed a strategy, and fast. "We need to contact Earth's military leaders," Hale said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "We need to gather every piece of intelligence we can. If the Empire is coming for us, we need to be ready. And if we're going to survive this, we need to act now." The soldiers didn't hesitate. They immediately began communicating with their commanders, their hands moving quickly over their comms as they set plans in motion. Dr. Hale turned back to the Guardian, who had remained silent, its form now glowing softly in the darkening landscape. "Are you still with us?" Hale asked, his voice a mix of desperation and resolve. "What do you expect from us?" The Guardian turned slowly, its massive eyes glowing with a deep, ancient wisdom. "You have no choice," it said, its voice calm and heavy with inevitability. "This fight is not just for your world. It is for the entire galaxy. And in the end, you will face a choice: fight to survive or surrender to the darkness." The words hung in the air, almost suffocating in their weight. Hale knew that the Guardian wasn't offering any hope, but a cold, hard truth. There would be no easy answers. The Empire would not be reasoned with, and they wouldn't stop until their goal was achieved. Humanity had to make a stand, and it had to be soon. "What can you do to help us?" Dr. Hale asked. The Guardian's eyes flickered for a moment before it replied. "I can guide you, teach you the ways of the universe, show you the ancient powers that have been lost to time. But you must be willing to take the first step." Dr. Hale felt his pulse quicken. "What do you mean? What do we need to do?" The Guardian raised one hand, a gesture that seemed both powerful and strangely graceful. "There are weapons beyond your comprehension. The Empire has known of them for millennia. You must learn them, or you will not survive." Dr. Hale swallowed hard. "Then teach us. We'll do whatever it takes. We'll fight." The Guardian nodded, and for a moment, the air felt charged with energy. The ground beneath them hummed with a low vibration, and the sky above seemed to darken, as though the stars themselves were watching. The tension was palpable. The soldiers around Dr. Hale straightened, determination filling their eyes. They had no choice but to follow this alien, to learn its ancient knowledge and take up arms against an empire that would stop at nothing to see them fall. But would it be enough? Would they be ready in time? The clock was ticking, and every moment that passed brought them closer to the terrifying truth. The Empire was coming, and humanity had only one chance to stop it. The training begins. The air in the underground facility was thick with anticipation as Dr. Hale and his team stood in front of the alien Guardian. The ancient being had agreed to help them, but there was one condition. Humanity had to undergo intense training to learn the lost powers it had mentioned. The task ahead was daunting. The weapons, technology, and abilities the Guardian promised were unlike anything the human race had ever known. But without them, they stood no chance against the Empire. "Are you ready?" The Guardian's voice echoed through the chamber, deep and commanding. It was more than just a question. It was a challenge. Dr. Hale glanced at the soldiers beside him. Their faces were set with determination, but there was a flicker of fear in their eyes. They had faced enemies before, but never something as vast and powerful as the Galactic Empire. This was different. The stakes were higher than they had ever been. "I'm ready," Hale said, his voice steady, though his mind raced. The gravity of the situation pressed down on him, but he couldn't afford to show fear. Humanity's future depended on them mastering these new powers. The Guardian stepped forward, and as it did, the air around them seemed to shimmer. A sudden hum filled the room, vibrating through every cell in their bodies. It was as if the very fabric of reality was being stretched. "You must learn quickly," the Guardian intoned. "The Empire will not wait for you to catch up." With a swift movement, the Guardian raised its hand. The room shifted. Suddenly, the walls began to glow, lines of energy tracing themselves across the surfaces. A series of holographic images appeared in front of them. Alien cities, starships, weapons of unimaginable power. Each image shimmered in midair, giving off a strange, otherworldly glow. "This is just the beginning," the Guardian continued. "These are the forces you will learn to control." One of the soldiers, a young man named Private Turner, took a step forward. His eyes were wide with awe and a hint of skepticism. "We can learn to control that?" he asked, his voice a mix of disbelief and wonder. The Guardian's gaze locked onto Turner. "You will," it said simply. Dr. Hale took a deep breath. They had no choice but to trust the Guardian and its mysterious knowledge. They had no idea how long they had to prepare. Time was running out. The training began immediately. For days, the humans were immersed in an entirely new way of thinking. The Guardian taught them how to tap into energy fields, manipulate gravity, and harness destructive forces beyond their wildest imagination. Each soldier was paired with a mentor, an experienced member of the alien Guardians race, to learn specific skills. Dr. Hale focused on a form of energy manipulation that the Guardian had called quantum weaving. It was a complex and dangerous technique that allowed the user to bend the fabric of space-time. Hale's first attempts were clumsy, as he tried to focus his mind and will on the swirling energy before him. His hands trembled as he reached out, attempting to control the chaotic forces. It felt as though the very air was fighting him. "Concentrate," the Guardian's voice resonated in his mind. "You must clear your thoughts and align your spirit with the energy. Only then will it obey you." Dr. Hale took a deep breath and closed his eyes. He tried to push aside the fear, the doubts, and the pressure of time. He could feel the energy around him, pulsing like a heartbeat. Slowly, he began to focus. Gradually, the energy around him stopped shifting uncontrollably and started to flow in the direction he wanted. "Good," the Guardian said, "but you will need more than just concentration. You must learn to control your emotions, for they will be your greatest enemy." Dr. Hale nodded, but inside, he wasn't sure if he could do it. The weight of humanity's survival hung over him like an invisible burden. Every misstep, every failure, could mean the end of everything. But as he practiced, something began to change. The energy felt less foreign, less dangerous. He could feel his power growing. He wasn't alone in this. Humanity was learning, adapting. Meanwhile, the other soldiers were also progressing in their own unique ways. Private Turner, who had struggled at first with the concept of manipulating energy, was beginning to show real promise with his newfound skills. His weapon of choice, an energy blade that the Guardian had introduced them to, now hummed with deadly precision in his hands. It was a weapon that could cut through almost anything, except, of course, the Guardian's own impenetrable armor. As the days turned into weeks, Dr. Hale saw the change in the humans around him. They had been transformed from soldiers in fear of the Empire to warriors ready for anything. Their training was far from over, but they were no longer weak or unprepared. They were becoming something else entirely. Yet, despite their progress, the looming threat of the Galactic Empire hung over them like a storm cloud. The Guardian's words echoed in Hale's mind. "The Empire will not wait for you." The time for training was running out. The Empire was coming. And when they arrived, humanity had better be ready. But as Dr. Hale looked at his team, he saw something that gave him hope. Strength in their eyes, determination in their hearts. They were no longer just humans. They were fighters. And the Empire had no idea what they were up against. The war was coming, and humanity was no longer afraid. The test of power. Weeks passed, and the underground facility, where humanity's most extraordinary training took place, became an almost mythical place. The soldiers were now far more than mere humans. They were warriors, equipped with powers and skills no one on Earth had ever dreamed of. The Guardian, though still an enigmatic figure, had become their mentor, guiding them through their trials with relentless discipline. Dr. Hale stood at the center of the training room, watching as the soldiers began their final test. This was no ordinary test. It was a trial designed to push them to their limits, to test their mastery of the incredible powers they had learned. It would determine if humanity was truly ready to face the overwhelming might of the Galactic Empire. Focus, the Guardian's voice boomed in their minds. This test will be your true measure. What you have learned must now become instinct. You will face trials tailored to your skills, your weaknesses. Overcome them or fail. The room shifted. Holograms materialized, displaying scenes of intense battles against seemingly invincible enemies. At first, these were simple tests of physical endurance, designed to test the soldiers' ability to adapt. They were confronted with environments that mimicked the harshest conditions the Empire could throw at them: extreme heat, freezing cold, high gravity, and even vacuum. Each soldier had to use their newfound abilities to survive. Private Turner was the first to step into the arena. His body glowed with the hum of the energy blade he had become skilled at wielding. His challenge was a series of advanced combat simulations where enemy ships, giant alien creatures, and robotic drones attacked without mercy. Turner's eyes narrowed as he faced the first threat. A hulking alien creature, 6 times his size, barreled toward him, roaring in fury. The beast was fast, and its claws were sharp enough to tear through steel. Turner's heart raced, but his hands were steady. His energy blade flared to life, casting an ethereal blue glow. The creature lunged at him, but Turner was already moving. He dodged to the side and swiped his blade through the air. The blade cut clean through the creature's arm, sending it howling in pain. With a quick series of moves, Turner managed to defeat the creature, his confidence growing as he sliced through his next series of enemies. Meanwhile, Dr. Hale watched with growing pride. Turner had come so far in such a short time. His once uncertain movements had transformed into precise, deadly motions. Humanity was ready for this fight. They had the power to face whatever the Empire threw at them. But the test wasn't just physical. Each soldier's mental strength was tested as well. Sergeant Jacobs, an experienced fighter, was put through a different trial, one that tested his willpower. He was placed in an environment that simulated deep space, where his suit had limited energy reserves, and he had to rely on his energy manipulation powers to survive. He had to create shields of force around him, using only his mind and the energy he had absorbed from the surroundings. For Jacobs, it was a struggle. His breathing quickened, and the weight of isolation set in. He felt the pressure of time and his waning energy. But he dug deep, remembering the importance of this mission. With a final push, he created an immense force field around himself, just as a wave of cosmic radiation surged toward him. He was tested to his absolute limit. But in the end, he succeeded. The trials continued, each more grueling than the last, testing every aspect of their training. Dr. Hale walked among them, offering words of encouragement and guidance when needed, but the soldiers had become something greater than even he had hoped. They were warriors, ready for whatever the galaxy could throw at them. In the final trial, each soldier was pitted against an entire army of holographic enemies. The training room was filled with the sounds of blasters firing, the clash of weapons, and the shouts of combat. The soldiers had to fight as one unit, relying on each other's skills and powers to survive. It was a battle of strategy, teamwork, and skill. Dr. Hale stood with his arms crossed, watching the humans work together. Turner was using his energy blade to cut through the enemy's defenses, while Jacobs used his force shields to protect the team. Sergeant Williams manipulated gravity, making it difficult for the enemy to stay grounded. Together, they were unstoppable. They moved as one, working with the precision of a machine, even though they were still human. The holograms around them flickered and disappeared as the final wave of enemies was defeated. The soldiers stood tall, breathing heavily but victorious. It was over. The Guardian's voice boomed once more, filled with approval. "You have passed the test. You are now ready." Dr. Hale exhaled in relief. The weight of the responsibility had been immense, but humanity had proven itself. They were no longer just survivors. They were a force to be reckoned with. However, the Guardian's next words sent a chill down Hale's spine. But the true test has yet to come. Hale's heart sank. The Empire was coming. The real battle, the one that would determine the fate of humanity, was imminent. The training had been intense, but now it was time for humanity to put everything they had learned to the test. The war had begun. The final countdown. The moment had arrived. Humanity, now fully equipped with new powers and strategies, stood on the precipice of their most dangerous mission, facing the Galactic Empire. They had trained for weeks under the guidance of the Guardian, mastering their powers, honing their combat skills, and learning the importance of teamwork. But none of that would matter if they couldn't put it into action when the time came. Dr. Hale paced nervously in the command center, his mind racing. The Galactic Empire was on the move, and there was no turning back. Their fleet had been spotted at the edge of the solar system, approaching Earth with menacing speed. The time for preparation was over. All that was left was to confront the Empire head-on and show them the might of humanity. The soldiers had gathered in the briefing room, preparing for the final push. Turner, Jacobs, Williams, and the rest of the team stood in formation, their expressions determined. They were no longer the soldiers who had first walked into the underground facility. They were a force to be reckoned with. "All systems are go," Dr. Hale said, his voice steady despite the nerves tightening his chest. "We're ready. Our fleet is in position, and the Guardian's guidance is available at any moment. It's up to you now. Remember, we fight as one." The soldiers nodded in unison, each one fully aware of the task before them. They had trained for this. They were ready. "Let's go," Turner said with a determined smile. The countdown began, and within moments, humanity's fleet of ships shot out of Earth's atmosphere, heading straight for the incoming Galactic Empire. The vast expanse of space stretched out before them, a battleground where they would either win or lose everything. As they approached the enemy fleet, the sheer size of the Galactic Empire's armada was staggering. Countless ships, each one more powerful than anything humanity had ever seen, lined up in the dark void of space. But the soldiers did not falter. They had faced worse in training and had emerged victorious. Turner's voice echoed over the comms. "Stay sharp, everyone. We've trained for this moment." The first strike came quickly. The Empire's fleet launched a barrage of plasma missiles, aimed directly at the advancing human ships. But humanity's new powers were more than a match for this initial assault. Williams used her gravity manipulation to distort the trajectory of the missiles, causing them to veer off course and explode harmlessly in space. "Nice work, Williams," Jacobs called over the comms, his voice filled with excitement. "Keep moving," Turner ordered. "We need to hit their flagship." The battle raged on, with each soldier using their unique abilities to turn the tide in their favor. The human ships moved with precision, dodging incoming fire and striking back with deadly force. But the Empire wasn't going down without a fight. Their ships retaliated with overwhelming firepower, and humanity's fleet was pushed back. Dr. Hale's heart raced as he watched the battle unfold from the command center. It was clear that humanity was holding their own, but the Empire was relentless. He watched as Turner's ship was hit by a plasma blast, sending it spiraling toward the dark abyss of space. "Turner!" Dr. Hale shouted, his breath catching in his throat. But Turner's voice came through the comms, steady as ever. "I'm fine, Dr. Hale. Just a scratch. We're not done yet." The determination in Turner's voice was a beacon of hope. They would win this battle. They had to. But just as it seemed that humanity's fleet was gaining the upper hand, the Empire's flagship unleashed a devastating weapon, a superlaser capable of annihilating entire planets. The laser charge, and for a moment, it seemed as though all hope was lost. Humanity's fleet could never withstand such a weapon. But then, the Guardian's voice boomed over the comms, a signal of hope. "Humans are not the underdogs. You have trained for this. Do not fear." The soldiers' spirits lifted as the Guardian's guidance flooded their minds. They knew what they had to do. They couldn't let the Empire destroy Earth, not after everything they had fought for. Turner and Jacobs led the charge toward the flagship, dodging laser fire and enemy ships. They were fast. They were united, and they had a plan. Together, they would disable the superlaser before it could fire. As they closed in on the flagship, Turner shouted, "Now, we take them down." The two ships performed a coordinated attack, weaving through enemy fire and hitting the flagship's weak points. It was a battle of wills, a fight that would determine the future of humanity. With a final, devastating blow, they struck the heart of the Empire's flagship, disabling the superlaser. The weapon's charge fizzled out, and a Galactic Empire's armada faltered. Humanity had won. The enemy fleet retreated, its commanders too stunned to continue the fight. The Earth's sky cleared of threats as humanity emerged victorious, having proven once again that they were not to be underestimated. Dr. Hale watched as the human fleet returned to Earth, the soldiers they had trained now heroes. It was a moment of triumph, a testament to what humanity could achieve when pushed to their limits. But as the ships landed and the soldiers disembarked, Dr. Hale knew that the war was far from over. The Galactic Empire might have retreated for now, but they would be back. And when they did, humanity would be ready. The fight for survival had only just begun.